Congrats, you've been approached to illustrate a book. Are you going to lose your copyright? How do you keep your copyright? How does that all work? That's exactly what we're going to cover in this week's episode of Ask Kif. Hi, I'm Kiffany Staley, founder of The Artist JD, a place designed to add ease to the legalese of running your creative business. This week's question comes to us from Lisa in Nebraska. Lisa asks, how do I keep my copyright when illustrating a children's book? Great question, Lisa. In the United States, you own your copyright unless something happens to transfer it to someone else. Now, one way this can be transferred is if you are an employee and what you're creating is in the scope of your employment. Here, that obviously doesn't apply because you're creating this via a freelance illustration contract, so you're not an employee. The second way copyright can be transferred is what's called a work for hire. What gets bandied around in the creative community as something being a work for hire and what is actually a work for hire under the Copyright Act is two different things. Under the Copyright Act, a work for hire is something that's specially ordered or commissioned in one of 7 categories. Those categories are a collective work, a movie or other audiovisual work, a translation, a supplementary work, a compilation, a test, answers to a test, or a textbook, or a map. And so most of the things that get called a work for hire actually aren't work for hires under the Copyright Act, which is why if you read your contract closely, you'll see that it has what we lawyers call a backup assignment clause. The contract is going to say this is considered a work for hire under the U.S. Copyright Act. But if for whatever reason it's not considered a work for hire, you assign the copyright to us. So in the instance of you having a freelance illustration contract, you're going to want to read it very carefully to make sure that there's not a work for hire with a backup assignment clause in your contract that would transfer the copyright either to the author or to the publisher. The third way that your copyright could be transferred is via a contract. Now, here in the United States, a copyright assignment must be in writing to be valid. So, once again, we're returning to our freelance illustration contract to see if that contract transfers the copyright. So if it doesn't have any of these 3 things, you don't have to do anything to keep your copyright. You already own it. You're going to make sure that you're not an employee, which you're probably not. You're going to make sure that there's not a work for hire agreement, a work for hire section with a backup assignment clause in your contract. And you're going to want to make sure that your contract doesn't just outright transfer the copyright or assign the copyright to either the author or the publisher. So the short version is you don't really have to do anything to keep your copyright, just make sure your contract doesn't transfer it to someone else. Since you own the copyright in these illustrations that are going to appear in the book, you'll probably want to register your copyright in them. So I've left a link below to the course I've put together that walks you step by step through the process of registering your copyrights with the U.S. Copyright Office. Got a question you want me to cover in an upcoming episode? Make sure you leave it in the comments below. Before you go, hit that subscribe button so that you can get notified when next week's video drops, and check out the video above. It talks about if you reference other illustrations or photographs in your work, how you're going to let the Copyright Office know about this when you register your copyrights. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next time.